Bullies cornered a lone black boy in the bathroom. His next move shocked everyone. Cold porcelain tile pressed against Elijah Johnson's back as he flattened himself against the bathroom wall. Three larger boys formed a half-circle around him, their faces contorted with cruel anticipation. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across the institutional green walls of Roosevelt High's second-floor bathroom. "Nowhere to run now, Einstein," sneered Marcus, the tallest of the three. His Letterman jacket stretched across broad shoulders as he took another step forward. "Let's see how smart you are when you're hanging from that stall door by your underwear." Elijah's heart hammered against his ribs, his palms slick with sweat. The backpack containing his science fair project, 6 months of research and late nights, lay discarded on the floor between them. His eyes darted from face to face, calculating odds, assessing escape routes. None existed. As Marcus reached for him, something shifted in Elijah's expression. The fear drained away, replaced by a calm so sudden, so complete that Marcus hesitated. In that heartbeat of uncertainty, Elijah made his move. No one could have predicted what happened next. 3 weeks earlier, Elijah Johnson stared out the window of his father's aging Buick as they crossed the town line into Mapleton. The welcome sign was weathered, its paint peeling at the edges, much like Elijah's enthusiasm for this move. At 16, he had left behind everything familiar, his friends, his academic team, the teachers who understood him. All gone because his father had accepted a position as the new head of maintenance at Mapleton General Hospital. "It's not forever, Eli," his father said, noticing his son's silence. Leon Johnson's hands gripped the steering wheel firmly, the veins prominent against his dark skin. "Just until we get back on our feet. This job pays better, has benefits. After your mom's medical bills." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The weight of Katherine Johnson's 5-year battle with cancer and the mountain of debt it had left behind hung between them like an unwelcome third passenger. "I know, Dad," Elijah replied, watching as they passed Mapleton's modest downtown. "It's fine." It wasn't fine. Nothing had been fine since his mother died 8 months ago. But Elijah had learned to say what his father needed to hear, one less burden for him to carry. Their rental house sat on Maple Street, a narrow 2-story with faded blue siding and a small front porch. It was half the size of their old home in Bedford, but as his father repeatedly pointed out, it was walking distance to Roosevelt High School. "You'll be able to sleep in a little later," Leon said with forced cheer as he pulled into the gravel driveway. "No more hour-long bus ride." Elijah nodded, gathering his backpack from the floorboard. "Yeah, that's good." The moving truck wouldn't arrive until tomorrow. They had packed only essentials for the night: sleeping bags, toiletries, a change of clothes. As Elijah followed his father up the cracked concrete walkway, he mentally calculated how long it would take to unpack all their belongings, set up his study space, and prepare for his first day at Roosevelt. The science fair was in 6 weeks. He needed to get his project back on track immediately. Inside, the house smelled of fresh paint and something older, mustier, history embedded in the walls. Elijah claimed the smaller bedroom upstairs, its walls a pale, institutional blue. He spread his sleeping bag in the center of the empty room and sat cross-legged, pulling out his notebook. While his father ordered pizza for dinner, Elijah sketched diagrams of his solar-powered water filtration system. The design had won first place at regionals in Bedford. At Roosevelt, if he could finish the modifications in time, it might be his ticket to finding like-minded peers, or at least earning some respect. That night, lying in his sleeping bag with moonlight streaming through uncurtained windows, Elijah allowed himself to imagine a best-case scenario. A smooth transition, a few new friends, teachers who recognized his potential. The reality, he suspected, would be far different. New kids were always targets, especially mid-year transfers. Especially ones who looked like him in a town as predominantly white as Mapleton appeared to be. His mother would have known exactly what to say to ease his anxiety. She'd had a gift for that, for making the impossible seem manageable. "One day at a time, Elijah," she would tell him. "That's how mountains get climbed." He closed his eyes, holding her voice in his mind until sleep finally came. Roosevelt High School loomed before him Monday morning, a sprawling brick building with an American flag flapping listlessly in the February wind. Students streamed through the main entrance, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air. Elijah adjusted his backpack straps and took a deep breath. "One day at a time," he whispered to himself, then joined the flow of students. The main office was tucked just inside the entrance. The secretary, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, glanced up as he approached the counter. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice neutral. I'm Elijah Johnson. Today's my first day. Recognition flashed across her face. Ah, yes, the transfer from Bedford. She rifled through a stack of papers, pulled out a schedule, and handed it to him along with a small map of the school. Your locker number and combination are at the top. First period starts in 15 minutes. Elijah thanked her and stepped back into the hallway, studying his schedule. Advanced placement, everything. His father had insisted the school honor his previous academic track. First period, AP Chemistry with Mr. Delaney in room 203. He found his locker, fumbled with the combination twice before it opened, and stowed his lunch inside. Keeping only the essentials, he closed the metal door and turned directly into the path of a girl rushing past. Whoa! She exclaimed as they collided, her armful of books tumbling to the floor. Sorry about that. My fault, Elijah said quickly, kneeling to help gather her scattered belongings. I wasn't looking where I was going. The girl crouched opposite him. She had warm brown skin a few shades lighter than his own and dark curly hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her eyes, when they met his, were a surprising amber color, bright with intelligence. You're new, she stated as he handed her a textbook. I'm Zoe Michaels. Elijah Johnson. Zoe stood, reorganizing her books. Where are you headed? Chemistry with Delaney. Her face brightened. Me too, come on, I'll show you the way. She gestured for him to follow. Fair warning, Delaney's brilliant but intense. Don't let him intimidate you. As they navigated the crowded hallway, Zoe pointed out landmarks. Cafeterias down that corridor. Libraries on the second floor, north wing. Avoid the third-floor bathroom. It's unofficially reserved for Marcus Whitley and his goon squad. Goon squad? Elijah repeated. Marcus, Tyler, and Derek, their seniors' football team, they pretty much run the social hierarchy around here. She glanced at him. Where'd you transfer from? Bedford High? The science magnet school? Impressive. They reached room 203 and Zoe paused at the doorway. What brings you to our humble institution? Dad's new job, Elijah said simply, not wanting to elaborate on their financial situation. Zoe seemed to sense his reluctance and didn't press. Well, Delaney assigns lab partners alphabetically, so I guess we're stuck together. She grinned. Johnson and Michaels could be worse. For the first time since arriving in Mapleton, Elijah felt a small spark of hope. Maybe this wouldn't be a complete disaster after all. That spark dimmed considerably at lunch. The cafeteria operated according to unspoken rules, invisible boundaries that everyone but Elijah understood. Zoe had a different lunch period, leaving him to navigate the social minefield alone. He stood at the entrance, tray in hand, scanning the room for an opening. Most tables were clearly claimed territory. Athletes huddled together near the windows, theater kids congregated by the stage doors, smaller cliques filled the spaces between. A few solitary students sat at the edges, but even they seemed to have designated spots. Elijah made his way to a half-empty table in the corner. As he approached, conversations faltered and several pairs of eyes tracked his movement. Is it okay if I sit here? He asked, directing the question to no one in particular. A girl with straight blonde hair shrugged. Free country. He sat at the end, leaving an empty seat between himself and the nearest person. As he unwrapped his sandwich, he could feel curious glances, hear whispered comments. He focused on his food, mentally reviewing chemical equations from that morning's class. So you're the new kid? Elijah looked up to find 3 boys standing behind him. The speaker, tall with sandy hair and a Letterman jacket, leaned against the wall. The other 2 flanked him like bodyguards. Marcus Whitley, the tall one continued, not waiting for a response. This is Tyler and Derek. He gestured vaguely at his companions. Heard you're some kind of genius. Elijah chose his words carefully. I don't know about that, I just transferred from Bedford. The Nerd Factory, said the one called Derek, a stocky boy with close-cropped hair. They sent us a press release about your science fair project. Very impressive. His tone made it clear he found it anything but. Elijah blinked in surprise. The school had sent out information about him. Marcus leaned closer. Listen, Einstein. Just so we understand each other, this isn't Bedford. Nobody here cares how many awards you've won or how high your IQ is. You want to fit in, you'll keep the smart as routine to a minimum. He straightened up. Consider this a friendly orientation. They walked away before Elijah could respond, leaving him with a cold knot forming in his stomach. So much for flying under the radar. By the end of the day, Elijah had a clear picture of his situation at Roosevelt. His classes were challenging enough intellectually, but the social terrain was treacherous. The brief interaction with Marcus had apparently put a target on his back. In his final period, AP Literature, he'd found crude drawings on his desk and heard snickering from the back row. As he walked home that afternoon, he wondered if he should tell his father about Marcus and his friends. But what would that accomplish? Leon was already working overtime, trying to make ends meet. He didn't need one more problem to solve. No, this was something Elijah would have to handle himself. Keep his head down, focus on his schoolwork, and avoid Marcus Whitley at all costs. 6 weeks until the science fair. He just needed to survive until then. The principle is simple, Elijah explained, adjusting the small solar panel attached to his filtration device. Contaminated water enters here, passes through these chambers where impurities are removed, and clean water exits here. He glanced up at Zoe, who was perched on his desk chair, watching with interest. They had been working together after school for the past week, fine-tuning Elijah's science fair project. The empty bedroom had quickly transformed into a makeshift laboratory, with diagrams covering the walls and components scattered across a folding table Leon had brought up from the basement. "And it's completely self-sustaining?" Zoe asked, leaning forward to examine the series of filters. "That's the goal. Once it's set up, it should run indefinitely as long as there's periodic sunlight." Elijah connected a wire, then stepped back. "The problem is efficiency. Right now, it's only filtering about 2 gallons per hour. I need to get that up to 5 without compromising water quality." Zoe tapped a pencil against her chin. "What if you increased the surface area of the filtration medium? More contact time could mean faster processing." Elijah considered this, mentally calculating the necessary adjustments. "That could work. I need to reconfigure the chamber dimensions, but—" He trailed off, already sketching modifications in his notebook. They had fallen into an easy partnership over the past week. Zoe was brilliant in her own right, top of their class in most subjects, and she approached problems from angles Elijah hadn't considered. More importantly, she seemed unfazed by the whispers and stares that followed them through the hallways. "You know," she said after a moment, "you should present this at the regional competition in March, not just the school fair." Elijah looked up from his notebook. "There's a regional competition. Every year, winners go to state, then nationals. Roosevelt's never sent anyone past regionals, but your design could change that." She paused. "Though Marcus might spontaneously combust if you brought home a trophy." The mention of Marcus darkened Elijah's mood. Past week had been a careful dance of avoidance, timing his movements between classes to minimize encounters, eating lunch in the library when possible. But Marcus seemed to materialize when least expected, always with a comment or a shoulder check just hard enough to send books scattering. "What's his problem anyway?" Elijah asked, setting down his pencil. "I've barely spoken to him," Zoe sighed. "It's not about you, not really. Marcus's dad is on the school board, old money, major influence. Marcus has spent his whole life being told he's special because of his last name. Then someone like you comes along, actually special because of what's in here," she tapped her temple, "and it threatens his whole worldview. So he makes my life miserable to protect his ego? Pretty much." Zoe slid off the chair and knelt beside the filtration device. "For what it's worth, not everyone follows his lead. People are starting to notice how he treats you." "Yeah, well, noticing and doing something are different things," Elijah muttered. A knock at the bedroom door interrupted their conversation. Leon Johnson stood in the doorway, still in his maintenance uniform, looking exhausted but curious. "How's it coming along?" he asked, nodding toward the project. Elijah's face brightened. "We're making progress. Zoe had an idea for improving the filtration rate." Leon smiled at Zoe. "Glad he's found a worthy co-conspirator. When he was little, I used to find him dismantling household appliances to see how they worked. Nearly gave his mother a heart attack when he took apart her hairdryer." "Dad," Elijah protested, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. Zoe laughed. "That explains a lot, actually." "Staying for dinner, Zoe?" Leon asked. "Nothing fancy, just spaghetti, but there's plenty." Before Zoe could answer, her phone chimed. She checked the screen and grimaced. "Rain check. My mom needs me to pick up my brother from basketball practice." After she left, Elijah and his father moved to the kitchen. Leon began boiling water for pasta while Elijah set the table, a familiar choreography from countless meals together. "She seems nice," Leon commented, his back to Elijah as he stirred sauce on the stove. "Smart, too." "She is," Elijah agreed, placing forks beside 2 plates. "Probably the only reason I haven't completely lost my mind at that school." Leon turned, his expression concerned. "That bad?" Elijah hesitated. He hadn't told his father about Marcus, about the daily indignities of being the new kid, about the whispers that sometimes followed him through the hallways. But something in his father's tired eyes, the same eyes that had maintained their warmth through his mother's illness, through the funeral arrangements, through the impossible decisions that followed, made him reconsider. "There's this guy, Marcus Whitley. He's decided I'm his personal punching bag." Leon's jaw tightened. "He's hit you." "Not exactly, it's more psychological, comments, intimidation, that sort of thing." Elijah shrugged, trying to minimize it. "Standard high school stuff. There's nothing standard about harassment, Eli. Leon abandoned the sauce to face his son fully. Do you want me to talk to the principal? No, Elijah said quickly. That would make everything worse. I'm handling it. By avoiding him? For now. Elijah fidgeted with a napkin. The science fair is in a few weeks. If I win, maybe it changes things, shows I belong there. Leon was quiet for a moment, studying his son with eyes that missed nothing. You know you don't have to prove anything to these people, right? Your worth isn't determined by their acceptance. I know that, Elijah said, though the words rang hollow even to his own ears. It's just easier if I'm not constantly fighting for basic respect. Leon nodded slowly. I understand that better than you might think. He returned to the stove, stirring the sauce with more force than necessary. When I started at the hospital, one of the doctors kept calling me the help. Wouldn't look me in the eye, left messes for me to clean up specifically. Elijah stared at his father's back, surprised. Leon rarely shared such experiences. What did you do? I did my job exceptionally well, fixed things before they asked, anticipated problems they didn't even know they had. A small smile crossed Leon's face. Last week, that same doctor was in a panic because a pipe burst in the surgical wing. Who did he call? Not the help. He called for Leon Johnson by name. He drained the pasta, steam billowing around his face. Sometimes the best response isn't confrontation or avoidance. Sometimes it's excellence, proving your value not because you need their validation, but because excellence is who you are. Elijah absorbed his father's words, turning them over in his mind. Excellence as identity, not just achievement. It was how his mother had lived, with quiet dignity and skill that demanded respect. The science fair, he said finally. I need to win it. Leon looked at him sharply. That's not quite what I meant. No, I get it, but the fair is where I can show excellence. It's my arena. Elijah felt determination solidifying within him. I'm going to make this filtration system perfect, and then I'm going to win. Later that night, after his father had gone to bed, Elijah stayed up redesigning the filtration chambers according to Zoe's suggestion. His mind kept returning to his father's words. Excellence is who you are. Not something to be proven, but something to be lived. He worked until his eyes burned, until the diagrams blurred before him. When he finally slept, he dreamed of clean water flowing endlessly from his device, washing away the barriers between himself and acceptance. 2 weeks into his time at Roosevelt, Elijah had established a routine. He arrived early to use the library before classes, ate lunch in Mr. Delaney's classroom where he could work undisturbed, and left promptly at final bell to avoid lingering in the hallways. Zoe joined him when her schedule allowed, but she had her own commitments: debate team, student council, volunteer work at the local hospital. During third period history, Elijah sat near the back, taking meticulous notes on the civil rights movement. Mrs. Porter, a silver-haired woman with piercing eyes and a commanding presence, paced before a timeline projected on the whiteboard. The struggle for equality didn't begin or end with Martin Luther King Jr., she was saying. The movement was built by thousands of ordinary people making extraordinary choices, often at great personal risk. Elijah found himself drawn into the lecture. Mrs. Porter spoke with the authority of someone who had lived through the events she described. When she mentioned the Montgomery bus boycott, there was something in her voice, a personal connection that transcended the textbook version. For 13 months, she continued, the black citizens of Montgomery walked miles to work, organized carpools, endured harassment and violence, all to challenge a system designed to demean them. They transformed daily indignities into a powerful statement of dignity. The bell rang, interrupting her flow. Students immediately began packing up, conversations erupting around the room. Mrs. Porter raised her voice slightly. Your assignment: select one lesser-known figure from the civil rights movement and prepare a 5-minute presentation on their contribution. Due next Wednesday. As Elijah gathered his books, Mrs. Porter approached his desk. Mr. Johnson, could you stay a moment? Anxiety flickered through him. Had he done something wrong? Said something inappropriate in his last essay. He waited as the classroom emptied, acutely aware of Marcus smirking at him from the doorway before disappearing into the hall. When they were alone, Mrs. Porter perched on the edge of a nearby desk. How are you adjusting to Roosevelt? The question caught him off guard. Fine, I guess. The academics are solid. And socially, Elijah shifted uncomfortably. It's a work in progress. Mrs. Porter nodded as if he'd confirmed something she already knew. I noticed you haven't spoken much in class, yet your written work shows remarkable insight. You clearly understand the material at a deep level. I just find it easier to express myself on paper. Perhaps you're trying to avoid drawing attention to yourself. Her gaze was kind but penetrating. I've been teaching at Roosevelt for 37 years, Mr. Johnson. I've seen many students come through those doors, and I recognize when someone is deliberately making themselves smaller to avoid conflict. Elijah stared at his shoes, unsure how to respond. Your analysis of the economic underpinnings of segregation was college-level work, she continued. You have a voice worth hearing. Thank you, Elijah mumbled, embarrassed by the praise yet oddly comforted by her recognition. Mrs. Porter stood, signaling the end of their conversation. For your presentation, I'd like you to research Bayard Rustin. I think you'll find his story illuminating. She wrote him a late pass for his next class, and Elijah hurried to AP Calculus, Mrs. Porter's words echoing in his mind. Making yourself smaller. Was that what he was doing, shrinking to fit the space Marcus and others had allocated for him? The thought stayed with him through the remainder of the day, through his walk home, through dinner with his father. That night, he researched Bayard Rustin, discovering a man who had helped organize the March on Washington, yet been kept in the background because of his sexuality. A brilliant strategist who refused to deny any part of his identity, despite the cost. Elijah found himself wondering what Rustin would make of his situation at Roosevelt. Would he see Elijah's avoidance strategy as wise self-preservation or as capitulation? The question followed him into uneasy dreams. The next morning, he decided to use the second-floor bathroom between classes, a small deviation from his routine, but the first-floor facilities were crowded. He pushed through the door, relieved to find the space empty, or so he thought. As he exited the stall, the main door swung open. Marcus Whitley entered, followed by Tyler and Derek. They stopped short when they saw Elijah, surprise quickly replaced by predatory grins. Well, look who it is, Marcus drawled. Einstein himself slumming it in our bathroom. Elijah's heart rate doubled. He moved toward the sink, hoping to wash his hands and leave without incident. I was just going. Tyler stepped in front of the door. What's the rush? We haven't had a chance to properly welcome you to Roosevelt. I'm fine, thanks, Elijah said, trying to keep his voice steady. I'll be late for class. Derek leaned against the sink, blocking Elijah's path. Heard you've been helping Zoe Michaels with her science project. Very generous of you. It's my project, actually, Elijah corrected before he could stop himself. Zoe's helping me. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Of course it is, because you're the genius, right? The special transfer student who's going to put Roosevelt on the map. He took a step closer, and Elijah instinctively backed up until he felt cold tile against his spine. The three boys formed a half-circle around him, cutting off any escape route. Here's what I don't understand, Marcus continued, his voice deceptively conversational. Why would someone like Zoe waste her time with you, pretty girl like that, hanging out in your bedroom working on science projects? He made air quotes around the words. Anger flashed through Elijah, momentarily displacing his fear. It's not like that, we're friends. Friends, Marcus repeated with a smirk. Sure you are, he glanced at Tyler and Derek. Maybe Einstein here needs a lesson in Roosevelt's social hierarchy. Tyler cracked his knuckles theatrically. Happy to provide some education. The cold porcelain tile pressed against Elijah Johnson's back as he flattened himself against the bathroom wall. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across the institutional green walls of Roosevelt High's second-floor bathroom. Know where to run now, Einstein? Sneered Marcus, the tallest of the three. His Letterman jacket stretched across broad shoulders as he took another step forward. Let's see how smart you are when you're hanging from that stall door by your underwear. Elijah's heart hammered against his ribs, his palms slick with sweat. The backpack containing his science fair project, 6 months of research and late nights, lay discarded on the floor between them. His eyes darted from face to face, calculating odds, assessing escape routes. None existed. As Marcus reached for him, something shifted in Elijah's expression. The fear drained away, replaced by a calm so sudden, so complete that Marcus hesitated. In that heartbeat of uncertainty, Elijah made his move. You want to know about my project? He asked, his voice surprisingly steady. The non sequitur caught Marcus off guard. What? My science project, the one Zoe's helping me with? Elijah slowly reached down for his backpack, maintaining eye contact with Marcus. I could show you. Confusion flickered across Marcus's face, quickly replaced by suspicion. What kind of game are you playing? No game. Elijah unzipped his backpack and carefully removed a small device, a series of connected chambers with a solar panel attached to the top. This is a solar-powered water filtration system. It can make contaminated water drinkable using only sunlight. Tyler and Derek exchanged bewildered glances, clearly thrown by this unexpected development. I've been working on it for 6 months, Elijah continued, his voice gaining confidence. It's designed for disaster relief, places without reliable electricity or clean water infrastructure. Marcus stared at the device, momentarily speechless. His expression wavered between anger at having his intimidation interrupted and genuine curiosity. The average person needs about 2 gallons of clean water daily to survive, Elijah explained, as if they were in a classroom rather than a standoff. Right now, this prototype can filter 2 gallons per hour, but I'm working to increase the efficiency to 5. So what? Marcus finally managed, though some of the hostility had left his voice. Why should I care about your science geek toy? Elijah met his gaze steadily. Because it could save lives, because knowledge is more powerful than ignorance, because excellence doesn't diminish anyone else, it elevates everyone. The words, echoes of his father's wisdom and Mrs. Porter's encouragement, hung in the air between them. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Then the bathroom door swung open. Mr. Delaney, the chemistry teacher, stopped abruptly at the tableau before him, 3 athletes surrounding Elijah, who stood with his project held before him like a shield. "What's going on here?" Delaney demanded, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. Marcus recovered first. "Nothing, sir." Johnson was just showing us his science project. Delaney looked skeptical. "Is that right, Mr. Johnson?" Elijah had a choice. He could expose the truth that he'd been cornered, threatened, or he could confirm Marcus's lie. The first option might bring temporary relief but long-term escalation. The second gave him an unexpected opening. "Yes, sir," he said after a pause. "I was explaining the filtration process." Delaney's gaze lingered on Elijah's face, searching for signs of coercion. Finding none, he nodded slowly. "Fascinating as that may be, you're all late for 4th period. Mr. Whitley, you and your friends should get to class." The 3 athletes filed out, Marcus casting one last unreadable look at Elijah before disappearing into the hallway. Delaney waited until they were gone before speaking again. "You know, Johnson, my classroom is always open if you want to discuss your project in a more academic setting." The subtext was clear. He hadn't believed the casual demonstration story, but was offering Elijah a safer space. "Thank you, sir," Elijah said, carefully returning the filtration device to his backpack. "I might take you up on that." As he walked to his next class, late pass in hand, Elijah replayed the bathroom encounter in his mind. He had faced his tormentors not with fists or fear, but with knowledge, with the very thing they had mocked him for. And for a moment, just a moment, he'd seen uncertainty in Marcus's eyes, a crack in the armor of arrogance. It wasn't a victory, not exactly, but it was something. A shift in the dynamic, a glimpse of possibility, excellence as identity, not just achievement. His father's words had become action. And maybe, just maybe, that was more powerful than any punch he could have thrown. Word of the bathroom confrontation spread through Roosevelt High with the efficiency of a well-designed algorithm. By lunchtime, Elijah had heard 3 different versions of the story, each more dramatic than the last. In one telling, he had delivered a passionate speech that left Marcus in tears. In another, Mr. Delaney had arrived just as Marcus was about to throw a punch, narrowly preventing violence. The truth, as usual, was more nuanced. But the net effect was undeniable. People were looking at Elijah differently. Students who had previously ignored his existence now nodded in the hallways. A girl from his calculus class asked if he would consider tutoring her. Even some of the athletes regarded him with grudging curiosity rather than contempt. Zoe found him in the library during lunch period, sliding into the chair across from him with barely contained excitement. "You're trending," she announced, keeping her voice low to avoid the librarian's wrath. "The whole school's talking about how you stood up to Marcus." Elijah frowned. "I didn't stand up to him, not really. I just talked about my project." "That's not how people see it. The story going around is that you faced down the 3 biggest bullies in school armed with nothing but science." She grinned. "It's a powerful narrative." "A fictional one," Elijah countered, though he couldn't help feeling a small spark of satisfaction. "I was terrified the whole time." "Courage isn't about not feeling fear," Zoe said, echoing something Elijah had heard his mother say countless times. "It's about what you do despite the fear." Before Elijah could respond, a shadow fell across their table. He looked up to find Derek standing there, awkwardly shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Johnson," Derek said with a curt nod. "Got a minute?" Elijah glanced at Zoe, who looked equally surprised by this development. "Sure," he said cautiously. Derek glanced around the library, then leaned closer, lowering his voice. "That thing you were talking about, the water filter, does it really work on any kind of water?" "Most kinds, yes." "Why?" Derek hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "My granddad lives out by Miners Creek. His well water's been contaminated with something, iron, I think. Turns everything orange, tastes like metal. He can't afford one of those fancy whole house systems." Elijah blinked, taken aback by this unexpected problem. I'd need to test it specifically for iron content, but theoretically, yes, it should work. The ferrous particles would bind to the activated carbon in the second chamber. Could you? I mean, would you be willing to look at it? His water. Derek's usual bravado was nowhere in evidence. He's on a fixed income and the bottled water is getting expensive. Elijah considered the request. This was Derek, one of the boys who had cornered him in the bathroom, who had laughed at Marcus's taunts, who had been a willing participant in his harassment, but the concern for his grandfather seemed genuine. I'd need a sample, Elijah said finally, and I can't promise anything. This is still a prototype. Relief washed over Derek's face. I can bring some tomorrow, in a bottle or something. Make sure it's clean, no soap residue. Derek nodded earnestly. Thanks, Johnson, I appreciate it. He straightened up, some of his usual demeanor returning. This doesn't mean we're friends or anything. Wouldn't dream of it, Elijah replied dryly. After Derek left, Zoe stared at Elijah with a mixture of amusement and admiration. And the plot thickens. First, you intellectually disarm them in the bathroom. Now you're solving Derek's family problems. What's next? Tutoring Tyler in physics. Don't even joke about that, Elijah groaned, though he couldn't help smiling. It's just a water sample. It's more than that, and you know it. Zoe leaned forward, her expression turning serious. You're changing the narrative, Eli. They wanted to cast you as the outsider, the target, but you're rewriting the script. Elijah considered her words. Was that what he was doing, rewriting the script? It hadn't been a conscious strategy, just an instinctive response in a moment of fear. Maybe, he conceded, or maybe Derek's genuinely worried about his grandfather. Both can be true. Zoe gathered her books, preparing to leave for her next class. By the way, Mrs. Porter asked me to remind you about your presentation next week. Bayard Rustin, right? Elijah nodded. I've been researching him. Fascinating guy. One of the unsung heroes, Zoe agreed. Mrs. Porter must see something in you to assign him specifically. After she left, Elijah sat alone in the library, turning over Zoe's observation, changing the narrative, rewriting the script. It was a powerful idea that he could shape how others perceived him, not by conforming to their expectations, but by consistently being himself. His thoughts were interrupted by a text message from his father, working late tonight. Pizza money on counter. Sorry, kiddo. Elijah texted back a quick acknowledgement, trying to ignore the familiar pang of disappointment. His father's overtime shifts had become more frequent lately, necessary for their financial recovery, but leaving Elijah alone more often than not. He used the extra time that evening to work on his Rustin presentation and refine his filtration system. Around midnight, exhausted but satisfied with his progress, he finally crawled into bed. As he drifted toward sleep, he found himself wondering what Derek's grandfather was like, whether he had the same broad shoulders and blunt manner as his grandson, or if perhaps Derek's concern for him revealed a gentler influence. The next day, true to his word, Derek approached Elijah before first period, a mason jar of rust-colored water in hand. This is from Granddad's kitchen tap, he explained, passing the jar to Elijah. It's worse in the morning before the pipes run clear. Elijah held the jar up to the light, examining the orangish tint and particulate matter suspended in the liquid. Definitely iron contamination, probably from old pipes or natural deposits in the well. Can your thing fix it? I'll test it today after school. Meet me in Mr. Delaney's room at 3:30. Derek nodded, then glanced around to ensure no one was watching their exchange. Don't tell Marcus about this, okay? He wouldn't understand. Before Elijah could respond, Derek walked away, rejoining a group of athletes down the hall. The interaction left Elijah puzzled. Derek's concern seemed genuine, but he was clearly uncomfortable being seen as friendly with Elijah. The social boundaries at Roosevelt were more complex than they first appeared. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, though Elijah noticed Tyler watching him during their shared English class, a thoughtful expression replacing his usual sneer. When the final bell rang, Elijah made his way to Mr. Delaney's classroom, the jar of contaminated water carefully packed in his backpack. Delaney looked up from grading papers as Elijah entered. Johnson, what can I do for you? I was hoping to use the lab equipment to test a water sample, if that's okay. I'm meeting someone at 3:30 to go over the results. Delaney's eyebrows rose slightly. This wouldn't happen to be related to your impromptu demonstration in the bathroom yesterday, would it? Elijah felt heat rise in his cheeks. Sort of. It's Derek Williams' grandfather's well water. It has iron contamination. A slow smile spread across Delaney's face. Fascinating how quickly scientific curiosity can spread, isn't it? Even to the most unlikely students. He gestured toward the lab tables. Be my guest. The spectrometer is calibrated and ready to go. Elijah set up his filtration device beside the sink, then carefully poured half of Derek's water sample into a beaker for testing. The spectrometer confirmed what was visually obvious: high iron content, along with trace amounts of manganese and sulfur, typical for well water in mining regions. He was running the remainder of the sample through his filtration system when Derek arrived, exactly at 3:30. The athlete entered cautiously, as if expecting a trap. "You came," Elijah said, a little surprised by the punctuality. Derek shrugged. "Said I would, didn't I?" He approached the lab table, eyeing the equipment with wary respect. "So what's the verdict? Can your gizmo help Granddad?" Elijah pointed to the spectrometer readout. "The iron content is high but not dangerous, about 3 parts per million. The real issue is the manganese, which is likely causing most of the taste problems." He indicated his filtration device, where Derek's orange water was slowly dripping through the chambers. "We should know in about 20 minutes if the filtration is effective." Derek nodded, though his expression suggested much of the technical explanation had gone over his head. He pulled up a stool and sat, watching the slow drip of water. "So," he said after a moment of awkward silence, "you've always been into this science stuff?" "Pretty much. My mom was a chemical engineer before she got sick. She used to bring home experiments for us to do together." "Was?" Derek asked, catching the past tense. "She died last year, cancer." Derek's face softened. "That's rough. My mom left when I was 8. Different situation, but I get it. The before and after of everything." An unexpected moment of connection hung between them, two boys who understood loss, though they had experienced it in different ways. Elijah found himself reevaluating Derek, seeing past the bully persona to something more complex beneath. "Your grandfather," Elijah said, changing the subject. "He lives alone?" Derek nodded. "Since Grandma died 5 years ago, he's pretty independent, still drives, does his own shopping. But the water situation's been getting him down. Says he feels like he's imposing when he comes to our house just to fill jugs with clean water." The image of an elderly man too proud to ask for help but too practical to drink contaminated water struck a chord with Elijah. It reminded him of his own father, stubborn in his self-reliance, determined not to be a burden. "If this works," Elijah said, gesturing to his device, "I could probably build a scaled-up version that would handle his daily needs. Not a permanent solution, but better than bottled water." Derek's eyes widened. "You'd do that for a stranger?" "It's what the system was designed for," Elijah replied with a shrug. "People who need clean water but don't have access to traditional infrastructure." Before Derek could respond, the door swung open. Marcus Whitley stood in the doorway, his expression darkening as he took in the scene before him. "There you are," he said to Derek. "Practice starts in 15 minutes. Coach is looking for you." His gaze shifted to Elijah, then to the filtration device. "What's all this?" Derek stood quickly, his earlier openness vanishing. "Nothing. Johnson's just helping me with something for my granddad." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Since when do you need the new kid's help with anything?" "It's a water testing thing," Derek said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "Granddad's well is contaminated." For a moment, conflict played across Marcus's face, disdain for Elijah warring with what appeared to be genuine concern. "Old man William's well, the one that turns everything orange." "My dad's been telling him to dig a new one for years." "Not everyone has dig-a-new-well money," Derek muttered. The comment seemed to strike a nerve. Marcus's jaw tightened, but instead of lashing out, he turned to Elijah. "So your science project thing can fix contaminated water?" "That's the idea," Elijah replied cautiously. "I'm testing it now on a sample from Mr. Williams' tap." Marcus studied the device with grudging interest. "And this is what you were trying to explain in the bathroom yesterday?" Before Delaney showed up. "Yes." A complex emotion flickered across Marcus's face, something like shame quickly suppressed. Well, don't make Derek late for practice. Coach makes us run extra laps for tardiness." He left without waiting for a response, his abrupt departure leaving an awkward silence in its wake. Derek exhaled slowly. "That could have gone worse." "Does he know about your mom?" Elijah asked, the question escaping before he could reconsider it. Derek shook his head. "Marcus doesn't do personal stuff. His family's got money, influence, different world." He checked his watch. "I should go, can't be late for practice." "What about your grandfather's water? Text me the results." Derek scribbled his number on a scrap of paper. "If it works, maybe we can figure something out for Granddad." After he left, Elijah continued monitoring the filtration process. When the sample had completely passed through the system, he tested the output water with the spectrometer again. The results were promising. Iron reduced to 0.1 parts per million, manganese to non-detectable levels. The water was clear, and a cautious taste test revealed no metallic flavor. He texted the results to Derek, along with an offer to build a larger system for his grandfather. The reply came hours later after football practice. Granddad says he'd be grateful. Can pay you for parts. That night, Elijah worked late designing a scaled-up version of his filtration system that could handle a household's daily water needs. As he sketched diagrams and calculated flow rates, he found himself thinking about the unexpected turns of the past 2 days. Derek's vulnerability regarding his grandfather, Marcus's momentary shame in the classroom, the glimpses behind their carefully maintained facades. People were more complicated than the roles they played in the high school hierarchy. More contradictory, more human. It was a simple realization, but a profound one, that the boy who had helped corner him in a bathroom could also be a grandson worried about an elderly man's well-being. That cruelty and kindness could exist in the same person. As he finally drifted towards sleep, Elijah wondered what his mother would make of these developments. She had always seen people in their full complexity, had always believed in the possibility of growth and change. "People will surprise you," she used to say, "usually just when you've decided they're predictable." The memory brought both comfort and a fresh wave of grief. He missed her wisdom, her perspective, her unwavering belief in his potential. But perhaps he thought as sleep claimed him, he was finally beginning to internalize the lessons she had taught him, to see beyond surfaces, to find connection in unexpected places, to recognize that everyone was fighting battles he knew nothing about. The school week ended with a subtle but unmistakable shift in Elijah's status at Roosevelt High. The active harassment had ceased, replaced by a wary curiosity from many students and tentative friendships from a few. Derek had introduced Elijah to his grandfather that Friday afternoon, a weathered, straight-backed man with calloused hands and keen eyes who had examined Elijah's filtration design with informed interest. "Used to work in the mines," Gerald Williams had explained, pointing out a potential issue with the intake valve. "Saw plenty of water problems down there. This design's clever, but you'll want to reinforce this connection if it's running continuously." They had spent 2 hours in the Williams garage, modifying the scaled-up system according to the older man's practical suggestions. By the time they finished, the device was sturdier and more efficient than Elijah's original design. "Appreciate this," Mr. Williams had said as Elijah packed up his tools. "Been drinking that rusty swill for 3 years now, too stubborn to admit it was getting to me." "Runs in the family," Derek had muttered, earning a gentle cuff on the ear from his grandfather. Now, as Saturday morning sunlight filtered through his bedroom window, Elijah found himself facing an unexpected dilemma, an invitation. Derek had texted late Friday night, "Barbecue at my place tomorrow. Granddad wants to thank you. 1 p.m. No big deal if you can't make it." The casual dismissal at the end couldn't quite mask the genuine invitation. But acceptance meant stepping further outside the comfortable boundaries Elijah had established, the focus on academics, the minimal social engagement, the clear separation between his world and that of Roosevelt's athletes. His father knocked lightly on the doorframe, already dressed in his maintenance uniform despite it being Saturday. "Morning, kiddo. Got called in for an emergency repair at the hospital. Broken pipe in radiology." Elijah sat up in bed, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "On a Saturday, do they pay you overtime for that?" "Time and a half." Leon adjusted his collar. "Should be home by dinner. Maybe we could order Chinese, have a movie night." The prospect brightened Elijah's mood. Their father-son movie nights had become increasingly rare as Leon's work hours extended. "Sounds good. Hey, Dad, I got invited to something today, a barbecue at Derek Williams' house." Leon's eyebrows rose. "Derek, one of the boys who was giving you trouble." "Yeah, but it's different now. I helped his grandfather with a water filtration system. It's sort of a thank you thing." His father studied him thoughtfully. "Quite a turnaround." Elijah shrugged. "People are complicated, I guess." A slow smile spread across Leon's face. "Your mother used to say that, usually right after I'd made some sweeping generalization about someone." He checked his watch. "I should get going. This barbecue, you think you'll go? I'm not sure. It might be awkward." "Growth usually is." Leon adjusted his tool belt. "Let me know what you decide. And Eli, I'm proud of how you're handling all this. The move, the new school, these boys. You're showing real character." After his father left, Elijah showered and dressed, still undecided about the barbecue invitation. He worked on his Bayard Rustin presentation for a while, then found himself texting Zoe. "Derek invited me to a barbecue at his house. His grandfather wants to thank me for the water filter. Weird, right?" Her response came quickly. "Definitely go. This is anthropologically fascinating, plus free food." Elijah smiled at her enthusiasm but remained hesitant. He had just about decided to decline when his phone buzzed with another text, this time from an unknown number. Hey, it's Tyler from school. Derek said you might come to the barbecue today. If you do, can you bring your water filter thing? Coach Pearson's daughter is doing a science project on environmental sustainability, and I told her about what you made. She's 10 and thinks it sounds super cool. The unexpected message tipped the scales. A 10-year-old girl interested in environmental science. How could he say no to that? He texted Derek his acceptance, packed his prototype in a secure box, and set off for the address he'd been given. The Williams home sat on the outskirts of Mapleton, a modest single-story with well-maintained gardens and a large detached garage. As Elijah approached the front door, he could hear music and conversation from the backyard. He hesitated, suddenly acutely aware that he knew almost no one at this gathering. What if Marcus was there? What if this was all some elaborate setup? Before he could reconsider, the front door opened. A woman in her 40s with Derek's same square jaw and direct gaze stood in the doorway. "You must be Elijah," she said warmly. "I'm Sandra Williams, Derek's mom. He told us you were coming." She glanced at the box in his hands. "Is that the famous water filter? Dad hasn't stopped talking about it since yesterday." "Yes, ma'am," Elijah replied, relaxing slightly at her friendly demeanor. "I brought it for Coach Pearson's daughter. Tyler said she was interested." "Lily, yes. She's quite the little scientist." Sandra held the door wider. "Everyone's out back. Come on through." Elijah followed her through the house, noting family photos on the walls, Derek in various sports uniforms, an older woman who must have been his grandmother, Mr. Williams, in what appeared to be mining gear from decades earlier. The backyard was larger than Elijah had expected, with a wooden deck extending from the house and a well-tended lawn beyond. About 20 people were scattered across the space, adults chatting near a smoking grill, children playing tag on the grass, teenagers clustered around a volleyball net. Derek spotted him immediately, breaking away from the volleyball group to meet him halfway across the lawn. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "And you brought your science thing. Awesome." Before Elijah could respond, Mr. Williams appeared at his grandson's side. "There he is, the water wizard himself." He clapped Elijah on the shoulder with surprising strength. "Filter's working perfectly, son. Water's clear as crystal this morning." His enthusiastic greeting drew attention from others nearby. Soon Elijah found himself surrounded by curious neighbors and relatives, all asking questions about the filtration system. He opened the box and began explaining the basic principles, surprised by the genuine interest. A small girl with braided hair pushed through the adults, her eyes wide with fascination as she examined the device. "Is this the water cleaner, the one that uses the sun?" "That's right," Elijah confirmed, guessing this must be Lily Pearson. "The solar panel powers a small pump that moves the water through these filtering chambers. So it doesn't need batteries or electricity?" she asked, running a finger along the transparent tubing. "Just sunlight." "Exactly. That makes it useful in places without power infrastructure." A tall man in a polo shirt, presumably Coach Pearson, stepped forward. "Lily's science project is on sustainable technologies. When Tyler mentioned what you'd built, she wouldn't stop asking about it." "It's really cool," Lily declared with the absolute certainty of a 10-year-old. "Way better than Jason Miller's stupid volcano." The adults laughed, and Elijah found himself relaxing into the unexpected role of scientific expert. He spent the next half hour answering Lily's increasingly detailed questions, impressed by her knowledge and curiosity. As the afternoon progressed, the initial awkwardness faded. Derek introduced Elijah to his teammates, sans Marcus, who apparently had a family commitment elsewhere, and even convinced him to join a casual volleyball game. Elijah, never particularly athletic, surprised himself by enjoying the competition and even making a few decent plays. During a break in the action, as most people were filling plates with barbecue, Tyler approached Elijah with 2 cans of soda. He offered one to Elijah with an awkward half-smile. "Thanks for coming," he said, popping the tab on his own drink. "Lily's been driving me crazy all week about science stuff. You basically saved my life." Elijah accepted the soda with a nod. "She's smart, asks good questions." "Yeah, she's all right for a bratty little sister." Tyler's attempt at nonchalance couldn't quite mask the obvious affection. "Look, about the bathroom thing the other day. And before that," he trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. "It's fine," Elijah said, saving him from having to articulate an actual apology. "Water under the bridge." Tyler looked relieved. "Cool, cool." He gestured toward the volleyball net where another game was forming. "You're not half bad, you know, for a science geek." "High praise," Elijah replied dryly but without malice. As the afternoon wore on, Elijah found himself drawn into conversations with various guests. answering questions about his filtration system, discussing his previous school, even explaining the upcoming science fair to interested parents. It was the most social interaction he'd had since moving to Mapleton, and while exhausting, it was also unexpectedly affirming. Around 4 o'clock, as the party was beginning to wind down, Mr. Williams approached Elijah with a small wrapped package. Almost forgot. Got something for you, son? Little thank you for the water filter. Elijah accepted the package, surprised by the gesture. You didn't have to do that, sir. I was happy to help. Wanted to go on, open it. Inside the wrapping was a wooden box, hand-carved with intricate geometric patterns. Mr. Williams explained, made it myself. Used to do woodworking before arthritis got the better of my hands. Thought you could use it for tools or those little components you're always fiddling with. The craftsmanship was exquisite, smooth edges, perfectly fitted joints, a lustrous finish that highlighted the natural grain of the wood. Elijah ran his fingers over the surface, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. It's beautiful, he said sincerely. Thank you, Mr. Williams nodded, pleased by the reaction. Appreciate what you did for me, not just the water thing, though that's plenty, but treating me with respect, listening to my suggestions. Don't get much of that these days, people assuming old folks have nothing to contribute. Before Elijah could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from his father. Pipe fixed. Heading home. Chinese still on for tonight. Reality intruded. The movie night with his dad, homework waiting to be completed, the science fair preparations still ongoing. He texted back a quick confirmation, then made his rounds of goodbyes, thanking Mrs. Williams for her hospitality and promising Lily he'd keep her updated on any improvements to the filtration system. As Derek walked him to the front door, there was a new ease between them, not quite friendship, but a mutual respect that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Thanks for coming, Derek said. Granddad really appreciated it. He doesn't get excited about much these days. I enjoyed it, Elijah replied, surprised to realize it was true. Your family's nice. Derek nodded, then added almost reluctantly, if you need any help with the science fair setup, heavy lifting or whatever, let me know. Least I can do. The offer, casual as it was, represented a significant shift. Elijah thanked him and headed home, the wooden box tucked carefully in his backpack alongside the filtration prototype. As he walked, he found himself reflecting on the unexpected turns of the past week. The bathroom confrontation that had somehow led to scientific curiosity. The bully who had become, if not a friend, at least not an enemy. The small acts of courage that had gradually shifted his place in Roosevelt's social ecosystem. It wasn't perfect. Marcus remained an unpredictable factor. The science fair still loomed as a critical test. The wound of his mother's absence still ached beneath every small victory. But something had changed, in how others saw him, yes, but more importantly, in how he saw himself. Excellence as identity, his father had said. Perhaps this was what it meant, not shrinking to avoid conflict, not changing to meet others' expectations, but simply being fully himself and letting the consequences follow naturally. By the time he reached home, Leon's car was already in the driveway. Elijah found his father in the kitchen, unpacking cartons of Chinese food. How was the barbecue? Leon asked, glancing up from his task. Elijah set the wooden box on the counter. Better than expected. Mr. Williams made this for me. Leon examined the box with appreciative eyes. Beautiful craftsmanship, old-school joinery, no nails or screws. He looked at his son with undisguised pride. Seems like you made quite an impression. I just helped with his water problem. You saw a need and met it with your skills, Leon corrected. That's more significant than you might think. He continued arranging food on plates. So what movie are we watching tonight? Your choice. As they settled in the living room with their dinner, Elijah found himself recounting the events of the past week. The bathroom confrontation, Derek's request for help, the shift in how he was perceived at school. Leon listened attentively, asking occasional questions, but mostly letting his son process the experience aloud. It's like they're seeing me differently now, Elijah concluded. Or maybe I'm seeing myself differently. Leon nodded thoughtfully. Your mother used to say that respect is earned in drops but lost in buckets. Sounds like you're earning those drops. I still miss her, Elijah said quietly. Every day. Me too, kiddo. Leon's voice was thick with emotion. But she'd be so proud of how you're handling all this. Finding your way, standing your ground, using what she taught you. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the shared grief a familiar presence between them. Then Leon reached for the remote. So, movie time. What'll it be? For the first time in months, as they watched an old sci-fi film they'd seen dozens of times before, Elijah felt something like contentment. Not happiness, That seemed too much to ask with his mother's absence still so raw, but a quiet sense that perhaps they would be okay. That the future, uncertain as it was, held possibilities as well as challenges. Later that night, he carefully placed Mr. Williams' wooden box on his desk and filled it with the precision tools he used for his science projects. The box seemed to represent something important, a tangible symbol of unexpected connections, of being valued for exactly who he was. As he prepared for bed, his phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. "How was the barbecue? Social anthropology report, please." He typed back, "Better than expected. Made friends with a 10-year-old science prodigy. Got a hand-carved box from Derek's grandfather. Played volleyball badly but enthusiastically." Her response came quickly. "See, I told you to go. This is how normal human connections form, shared experiences, mutual appreciation, terrible sports performances." Elijah smiled at her assessment. "Thanks for the push, you were right. I usually am. It's both a blessing and a curse. See you Monday. Mrs. Porter says our Rustin presentations are up first." The reminder of the upcoming presentation sent Elijah back to his notes. He worked for another hour, refining his points about Rustin's behind-the-scenes influence on the civil rights movement. As he finally turned out the light, he found himself wondering what Rustin would make of his situation. The compromises, the small victories, the gradual earning of respect. One drop at a time, he thought as sleep claimed him. One drop at a time. Monday morning brought renewed anxiety as Elijah prepared for his presentation. He had spent Sunday finalizing his notes and practicing his delivery, but public speaking had never been his strength. His mother had always encouraged him to share his knowledge, insisting that ideas gained power when articulated, but her confident voice in his memory couldn't quite override his nervousness. As he walked to school, Elijah mentally rehearsed his opening lines. Mrs. Porter had assigned Bayard Rustin specifically, a deliberate choice that still puzzled him. What had she seen in Elijah that made her connect him with the controversial civil rights strategist? The hallways of Roosevelt seemed different somehow, the hostile territory of his first days now transformed into something more neutral. Students nodded as he passed. A few called him by name. Near his locker, he spotted Tyler and Derek talking with Marcus, who had been conspicuously absent from the Saturday barbecue. Elijah tensed instinctively, but the three athletes merely glanced his way. Marcus gave a curt nod, not friendly exactly, but lacking the previous animosity. Progress of a sort. Zoe was waiting by his locker, practically vibrating with nervous energy. "Ready for Rustin?" she asked as he approached. "I was up until midnight finishing my slides on Diane Nash." "As ready as I'll ever be," Elijah replied, exchanging his science textbook for history materials. "Not a fan of public speaking." "You'll be fine," Zoe assured him. "Just pretend you're explaining your filtration system to Lily Pearson. Derek says she hasn't stopped talking about you all weekend." Elijah smiled at that. "She's a smart kid, asks better questions than most adults." They walked to history class together, joining the stream of students filing into Mrs. Porter's room. The teacher stood at the front, arranging papers on her desk, her silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. She looked up as Elijah entered, giving him a small nod of acknowledgement. "Good morning, everyone," she began once the bell rang. "As you know, today we begin our presentations on unsung heroes of the civil rights movement. Mr. Johnson has volunteered to go first." Elijah blinked in surprise. He hadn't volunteered for anything, but rose from his seat and made his way to the front of the room. His heart pounded as he faced his classmates, some attentive, others already showing signs of boredom. He took a deep breath, channeling his mother's calm confidence, and began. Bayard Rustin was a man who changed American history from the shadows. As the chief organizer of the 1963 March on Washington, he coordinated one of the most significant peaceful protests in our nation's history. Yet most history books barely mention his name. As he spoke, Elijah found his nervousness gradually subsiding. The facts he had researched became a narrative, the story of a brilliant strategist who was kept in the background because of his sexuality, who faced discrimination even within the movement he served, who nonetheless remained committed to nonviolent resistance and human dignity. Rustin understood something fundamental, Elijah continued, warming to his subject. That real change comes not just from dramatic confrontations, but from persistent strategic pressure. That sometimes the most powerful acts are the quietest ones. That dignity cannot be given or taken away. It can only be recognized or denied. He noticed Mrs. Porter watching him with a small smile, nodding occasionally as he hit key points. In the back row, surprisingly, Marcus Whitley was actually taking notes, his usual mask of indifference temporarily set aside. Perhaps most importantly, Elijah concluded, Rustin refused to separate his identities or prioritize one struggle over another. He was simultaneously black, gay, a Quaker, a former communist, a pacifist, and he brought his whole self to the fight for human dignity. He once said, "We need in every community a group of angelic troublemakers, people willing to stand for what's right, even when it's difficult, people who refuse to be defined by others' limitations." As he returned to his seat amid polite applause, Elijah caught Mrs. Porter's approving nod. Whatever she had seen in him that prompted the Rustin assignment, he seemed to have met her expectations. The remaining presentations filled the period: Zoe's passionate account of Diane Nash's courage during the Freedom Rides, other students covering figures from John Lewis to Ella Baker. As the bell rang, Mrs. Porter called out, "Mr. Johnson, a moment, please." Elijah approached her desk as the room emptied, curious and slightly anxious. "Excellent work today," she said once they were alone. "You captured Rustin's essence, his strategic mind, as well as his personal integrity." "Thank you," Elijah replied. "He was fascinating to research." Mrs. Porter regarded him thoughtfully. "I assigned Rustin to you specifically, do you understand why?" Elijah hesitated. "I've been wondering about that." "I see similarities," she explained. "Not in your circumstances, of course, but in your approach. Rustin understood that change doesn't always come through confrontation. Sometimes it comes through demonstration, showing a better way rather than merely criticizing the existing one." She shuffled papers on her desk, then continued. "I've been teaching at Roosevelt long enough to recognize patterns. When I saw how Marcus and his friends were treating you, I expected the usual outcome: escalation, eventual violence, disciplinary action that solves nothing. Instead," she said with a small smile, "I hear you've been helping Derek Williams' grandfather with water filtration technology, that Tyler Pearson's little sister is now your scientific protégé, that you diffused a potentially violent situation in the bathroom by giving an impromptu science lecture." Elijah felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Word gets around fast. It's a small school," Mrs. Porter agreed, "but my point is this: like Rustin, you found a way to change the dynamic without compromising your integrity. That's a rare skill, Mr. Johnson, one worth developing." She wrote him a pass for his next class. "The science fair is this Friday, correct?" Elijah nodded. "Final preparations all week. I look forward to seeing your project." She handed him the pass with a smile. "Angelic troublemaker." The phrase, Rustin's own words from Elijah's presentation, stayed with him through the day. Angelic troublemaker. Someone who disrupted the status quo not through force but through principled action. Was that how Mrs. Porter saw him? How he was beginning to see himself? At lunch, he joined Zoe at her usual table, now accompanied by a few members of the debate team who had previously ignored his existence. The conversation flowed easily around him: college applications, upcoming debate tournaments, weekend plans, and Elijah found himself participating without self-consciousness. "Johnson!" The voice behind him belonged to Marcus Whitley. Conversation at the table faltered as everyone turned to look. Marcus stood alone, no sign of Tyler or Derek nearby, his expression unreadable. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked, gesturing toward the hallway. "Alone." Elijah exchanged a glance with Zoe, who raised her eyebrows in silent question. He nodded to reassure her, then followed Marcus out of the cafeteria, curiosity overriding caution. In the relative quiet of the corridor, Marcus leaned against a row of lockers, arms crossed defensively. "That presentation you gave in Porter's class, about the gay civil rights guy." "Bayard Rustin," Elijah supplied. "Right, him." Marcus seemed to be struggling with something, choosing his words carefully. The part about him being kept in the background because of who he was, that hit home. Elijah waited, unsure where this was going. "My brother's gay," Marcus said finally, the words coming out in a rush. "He came out last year right before leaving for college. My dad didn't take it well, said some things he can't take back. Now they barely speak." Understanding dawned. "That must be difficult." Marcus shrugged, a practiced gesture of indifference that didn't quite convince. "It is what it is. Listening to you talk about this Rustin guy, how he didn't let it stop him from doing important work, I don't know, made me think about Michael differently." He straightened up, reassuming some of his usual demeanor. "Anyway, decent presentation. You actually made history interesting for once." Before Elijah could respond, Marcus continued, "One more thing, the science fair on Friday. I'll be there." "You will?" Elijah couldn't mask his surprise. "School board member's son, remember." "Mandatory appearance." A hint of the old smirk returned. "Plus, Lily Pearson won't shut up about your water filter. Tyler says she's making his life hell, demanding he bring her to see it in action." She's welcome to come, Elijah said. She asks good questions. Marcus nodded, then added, For what it's worth, I was a jerk in the bathroom that day, and before that, it wasn't about you, not really. It wasn't quite an apology, but Elijah recognized the effort it took, the vulnerability beneath the practiced nonchalance. Water under the bridge, he said, echoing what he'd told Tyler at the barbecue. Right, Marcus pushed off from the lockers. See you Friday, then. May the best science geek win. As he walked away, Elijah found himself pondering the unexpected conversation. Marcus's revelation about his brother added another dimension to the bully he'd first encountered. Another reminder that people were more complex than their worst moments might suggest. The rest of the week passed in a blur of final preparations for the science fair. Elijah spent every spare moment refining his filtration system, incorporating suggestions from Mr. Williams and addressing feedback from Mr. Delaney's preliminary evaluation. Zoe helped when she could, but her debate team had reached the regional finals, limiting her available time. By Thursday evening, Elijah was both exhausted and exhilarated. His project was ready, the culmination of months of work, now enhanced by the practical input from his new connections in Mapleton. Leon had taken a rare evening off to help transport the larger demonstration model to the school gymnasium, where it now sat covered by a cloth, awaiting tomorrow's judging. Proud of you, kiddo, Leon said as they drove home, the empty truck bed a reminder of completed preparations. Win or lose tomorrow, what you've built is remarkable. Thanks, Dad, Elijah's voice betrayed his fatigue. I just hope it works like it's supposed to. The larger scale introduces new variables. That's true of most things in life, Leon observed. Scale changes the equation, but the fundamental principles remain sound. At home, Elijah tried to sleep but found his mind racing with last-minute concerns. What if the pump failed during demonstration? What if the filtration rate dropped under scrutiny? What if, after everything, his project simply wasn't good enough? He must have eventually drifted off because the next thing he knew, his alarm was blaring and sunlight was streaming through his window. Friday had arrived, science fair day. Roosevelt's gymnasium had been transformed overnight into a showcase of student innovation. Long tables lined the perimeter, each hosting a different project complete with display boards, demonstrations, and nervous students. In the center, judges circulated with clipboards, asking questions and making notes. Elijah stood beside his station, the cloth still covering his filtration system as he awaited his turn for evaluation. Around him, the familiar chaos of the science fair unfolded, parents taking photos, teachers offering last-minute advice, students rehearsing their presentations with varying degrees of confidence. Quite the turnout, said a voice beside him. Elijah turned to find Mr. Delaney surveying the room with obvious pride. Roosevelt hasn't seen this much interest in the science fair in years. Elijah nodded, too nervous for extended conversation. His eyes kept drifting to the judges, 3 professionals from local industries and 2 science professors from the community college. They moved methodically from station to station, spending approximately 10 minutes with each student. You're up soon, Mr. Delaney noted, checking the evaluation schedule. Any last-minute concerns? About 1,000, Elijah admitted with a weak smile. But the system tested perfectly yesterday. Then trust your work, Delaney advised. You know this project better than anyone else in this room. Just explain it clearly and let the results speak for themselves. As the chemistry teacher moved on to check on other students, Elijah spotted familiar faces entering the gymnasium. Derek and Tyler arrived together, followed by a bouncing Lily Pearson who immediately began scanning the room for Elijah's station. Behind them, somewhat surprisingly, came Marcus Whitley, his expression neutral as he surveyed the competition. Lily spotted Elijah and rushed over, her excitement palpable. Is that it? She asked, pointing to the cloth-covered apparatus. The big version of your water cleaner? That's it, Elijah confirmed. Official judging starts in about 20 minutes. Can I see it? She pleaded. Before everyone else, I won't touch anything, I promise. Elijah glanced around, confirming no judges were nearby. Quick peek, he agreed, lifting one corner of the cloth to reveal the scaled-up filtration system. Multiple chambers connected by clear tubing showed the progressive cleaning stages, with the solar panel now large enough to power a more substantial pump. Lily's eyes widened with genuine appreciation. It's beautiful, she breathed, leaning closer to examine the components. Way better than my dad's boring old water filter. Tyler rolled his eyes at his sister's enthusiasm but couldn't quite hide his own interest. So this is what all the fuss is about. Pretty impressive, Johnson. Derek nodded in agreement. Granddad says his water hasn't been this clean in years. Whatever you did, it works. Their validation calmed Elijah's nerves somewhat, grounding him in the practical reality of what he'd created, not just a science project, but a solution to a real-world problem. Excellence as identity, his father had said. This was what it looked like. Marcus approached more cautiously, maintaining some distance as he examined the covered device. Big Day Einstein, he said, the nickname now carrying less venom than before. Lots of competition. I noticed, Elijah replied, surveying the room. Some really innovative projects this year. Yeah, well, Marcus shifted awkwardly. Good luck or whatever. Before Elijah could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A news crew from the local station was setting up equipment, the reporter consulting with Principal Dawson about the best angle for their coverage. Since when does Channel 5 care about Roosevelt's science fair? Tyler wondered aloud. The answer came from an unexpected source, Marcus. Since a finalist from last year's national competition transferred here, he said, nodding toward Elijah. My dad mentioned it at dinner last night, board's hoping for some positive publicity for the district. Elijah felt a surge of anxiety. No one said anything about news coverage. Welcome to small-town politics, Marcus replied with a hint of his old cynicism. Any chance to look good on camera? Before the conversation could continue, Mr. Delaney returned, clipboard in hand. They're ready for you, Johnson. Judges are approaching your station next. Lily wished him luck with a quick hug that caught him by surprise. Tyler and Derek offered encouraging nods. Even Marcus managed a don't choke that somehow sounded supportive rather than antagonistic. As they moved away to give him space, Elijah took a deep breath and uncovered his filtration system completely. The judges, 3 men and 2 women in business attire, approached with expressions of polite interest. Mr. Johnson, said the lead judge, consulting her clipboard, I understand you've developed a solar-powered water filtration system. Yes, ma'am, Elijah replied, falling into the familiar rhythm of his explanation. This device uses only sunlight to power a continuous filtration process capable of removing contaminants from various water sources. As he detailed the technical specifications and demonstrated each stage of the process, Elijah felt his nervousness fade, replaced by the calm confidence that came from thorough preparation and genuine knowledge. He answered their questions about flow rates, filter composition, and scalability, even acknowledging the design improvements suggested by Mr. Williams without hesitation. And you've tested this on actual contaminated sources? Asked one of the professors, examining the output collection container. Yes, sir. Most recently on well water with high iron content. Before that, on samples from Bedford Creek near my previous school, which has agricultural runoff issues. The judges exchanged impressed glances. One made a note about real-world application on her clipboard. One final question, Mr. Johnson, said the lead judge. What inspired this project? Why water filtration specifically? Elijah hesitated, then decided on honesty. My mother was a chemical engineer specializing in water treatment systems. Before she died last year, we would discuss how existing technologies often fail to reach communities most in need of clean water, either because of cost or infrastructure requirements. This design was our last project together. I've been refining it ever since. A moment of respectful silence followed his explanation. Then the lead judge thanked him, and the group moved on to the next station, leaving Elijah with a curious mixture of emotions: pride in his presentation, grief at the mention of his mother, anxiety about their evaluation. He was still processing these feelings when a reporter and cameraman approached his station. Elijah Johnson, I'm Sarah Chen from Channel 5 News. Would you mind demonstrating your project for our viewers? The next half hour passed in a blur as Elijah found himself explaining his filtration system on camera, fielding questions about its potential applications, and responding to the reporter's evident enthusiasm. By the time they finished, a small crowd had gathered around his station, students, parents, teachers, all watching with genuine interest. Among them, Elijah spotted his father standing at the back, still in his maintenance uniform, pride evident in his face despite his obvious exhaustion. They exchanged a small wave across the distance, a private moment of connection amid the public spectacle. As the afternoon progressed, judges completed their evaluations and retreated to a separate room for deliberation. Students began comparing notes on the questioning, speculating about potential winners. Zoe arrived just as the interviews concluded, apologizing for her tardiness. Debate practice had run long, but eager to hear about Elijah's presentation. The judges seemed impressed, he told her as they sat on folding chairs near his station. And the reporter kept asking about potential commercial applications. Of course they were impressed, Zoe said confidently. It's brilliant work. Even Marcus Whitley couldn't find a way to dismiss it. Speaking of Marcus, Elijah scanned the room, eventually spotting him near the refreshment table, deep in conversation with his father, a stern-looking man in an expensive suit. He's been different lately. Almost decent. Zoe followed his gaze. People can surprise you, I guess, though Mr. Whitley still looks like he swallowed a lemon. Their observations were interrupted by Principal Dawson's voice over the gymnasium's PA system, announcing that judges had reached their decisions. Students hurried back to their stations, nervous energy filling the room as everyone waited for the results. Elijah found himself surprisingly calm. He had done his best work, had presented it clearly, had answered every question with knowledge and precision. Whatever the outcome, he knew his project had merit, had already proven its worth in Mr. Williams' home. Principal Dawson began with honorable mentions, then moved to third place, a sophomore's investigation of local soil contamination, and second place, a senior's machine learning algorithm for predicting weather patterns. As he prepared to announce the first-place winner, the gymnasium grew silent with anticipation. And the first-place award for this year's Roosevelt High School Science Fair goes to Elijah Johnson for his solar-powered continuous water filtration system. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Elijah stood in momentary shock, then made his way to the front to accept the trophy, a modest crystal obelisk with his name already engraved on the base. Principal Dawson shook his hand for the cameras, leaning close to murmur, "Well done, young man. You've set a new standard for Roosevelt." As he returned to his station, trophy in hand, Elijah was surrounded by well-wishers. Zoe hugged him tightly, her pride evident. Mr. Delaney offered hearty congratulations. Lily Pearson jumped up and down, declaring that she knew it all along. Even Derek and Tyler seemed genuinely pleased, offering fist bumps and backslaps. Through the crowd, Elijah caught sight of his father, still at the back of the room, wiping suspiciously at his eyes. He began making his way toward Leon, eager to share this moment with the one person who truly understood what it meant. Before he could reach his father, however, Marcus Whitley stepped into his path. For a moment, old instincts flared. Was this confrontation, retaliation for outshining him? But Marcus merely extended his hand. "Congratulations," he said simply. "You earned it." Elijah accepted the handshake, noting the genuine respect in Marcus's eyes. "Thanks. Regional competition next, right?" Marcus asked. "End of March. That's the plan," Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "You'll need transportation, bigger setup, maybe some help with the heavy lifting." "Probably," Elijah agreed, unsure where this was going. "Derek, Tyler, and I could help if you want." The offer was casual, almost reluctant, but sincere. "My dad's truck has plenty of space." Elijah blinked in surprise. "You do that?" A complex emotion crossed Marcus's face, something like regret mixed with resolve. "Yeah, well, excellence deserves support, right? Isn't that what this place is supposed to be about?" Before Elijah could respond, Mr. Whitley appeared at his son's side, extending his own hand toward Elijah. "Impressive work, young man. You've brought some welcome attention to Roosevelt's science program." "Thank you, sir," Elijah replied automatically, shaking the offered hand. "Marcus tells me you might be interested in engineering as a career path," Mr. Whitley continued. "I have some connections at State University's engineering department. Perhaps we could discuss your options sometime." The conversation continued briefly, polite, superficial, clearly for the benefit of nearby observers, before the Whitleys moved on to speak with Principal Dawson. Elijah finally reached his father, who pulled him into a tight embrace. "She would be so proud," Leon whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "So damn proud." "I know," Elijah replied, his own eyes filling. "I felt her with me today." They stood together for a moment, sharing grief and triumph in equal measure. Then Leon straightened up, composed himself, and gestured toward Elijah's project. "So, regional champion in the making, what's next for the Johnson water filtration empire?" Elijah smiled at his father's attempt at lightness. "Refinements for regionals. Maybe some collaborations." He glanced toward where Zoe was chatting animatedly with Lily Pearson, then to Derek and Tyler helping other students disassemble their projects, and finally to Marcus, standing somewhat apart but watching the proceedings with new eyes. "Seems like you've assembled quite a team," Leon observed, following his gaze. "Quite a change from a few weeks ago." Elijah nodded, thinking of Bayard Rustin organizing behind the scenes, of his mother's patient problem-solving, of his father's quiet dignity earning respect one interaction at a time. "Excellence is who you are," he said softly. Not something to be proven, but something to be lived. Leon smiled, recognizing his own words returned to him. Exactly right, and sometimes living that excellence changes more than just your own circumstances. As they began dismantling the filtration system for transport home, Elijah found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The fear and isolation of those first days at Roosevelt, the bathroom confrontation that had somehow become a turning point, the small acts of courage that had gradually shifted how others saw him and how he saw himself. Mapleton wasn't Bedford. Roosevelt wasn't his old school. But somehow, unexpectedly, it was becoming a place where he belonged, not by changing who he was, but by fully embracing it, by letting his excellence speak for itself, by refusing to be defined by others' limitations. Angelic troublemaker Mrs. Porter had called him. Maybe she was right. Maybe that's what it took to change the world, or at least a small corner of it. Not grand gestures or confrontations, but persistent demonstration of a better way. One drop of respect at a time until the bucket was full. His mother would have appreciated the poetry of that. Clean water changing lives, one drop at a time.